Well, every road I see leads away from me. There's not a single one that leads me home. The road keeps saying, friend, come see what's round the bend. So is it any wonder that I roam? All the places I have been keep calling me back again. Down in the pines I hear the cold winds blow. My heart keeps telling me, foot loose and fancy free, and the road goes by and calls me as it goes. Well, maybe somewhere there's a someone waiting with a smile, and maybe there'll be some place I can stop and rest a while. And maybe you weren't meant to be just a rolling stone, and there's a road to travel on that leads you back to home.
Well, hello. I've not forgot it's my show, not Garrett's. Welcome back, everybody, to Tales of the Trail. Got, of course, me, and right there next to me on that side is Garrett. Down there is Ethan from 11 Bang Bang. Y'all know who they are. So, anyways, yeah, welcome back. The topic tonight is the weapons of the Indian Wars. Which, unfortunately, on these live streams, we can't handle them anymore. So it's just going to be a discussion and no show and tell, unfortunately. But maybe Garrett can throw some pictures up on there. I don't know.
I can find some pictures, probably.
Yeah, we can find some pictures. So, anyways, the traditional way of starting these is Garrett will kind of go through the chat here, and I'll try to get my thoughts organized. That may take a while, but we'll try it anyway.
All right, we have 26 people here already. Woo! Yeah, on one channel.
There we go. That's a pretty good start for these usually.
Yeah, and that's considering YouTube hasn't sent out any of the notifications for about another 20 minutes.
Well, it told me I was going live about 30 seconds after we went live, but yeah.
I still haven't got the notifications. So.
Oh, it told me on here. It's like, yeah, StreamYard told me it was live 30 seconds after we were live.
I just got the notification. All right, so Here we go. Stephen Mann is in. He said the old mountain man is into house. Diane Houston says hello. Billy Allen says howdy, fellas. Louisiana Gray says good evening. George Gooding says good evening, everyone. Doug Duke says good evening, all. Kodak Tackman's in. He said evening, fellas. D. I'm sorry, man. I can never get that name.
Unternier.
We just call him D.
Unternier.
Says it has been a ride of an evening, so I'm looking forward to sitting back and learning about some Old West.
There we go.
Black Powder Firearms Enthusiast is in. Said good evening, everyone. Oregon Outback said hello, Duke. Dukes, Doug, the Dukettes, and John the Duke Wayne if he's watching. Texas 1836 says good evening, boys. AR American says evening. The Saboteur 45. Hi.
Howdy, Saboteur. I got some stuff to send you one of these days.
Louisiana Gray's in says the lack of display models is disappointing. Well, they're on the wall back there. Just kind of use your imagination.
Yeah.
Wiggly Brick 75 says hi. I'm going to be careful this week. They got me last week.
And if anybody's wondering, Ethan's playing with a piece of wood down there.
Yes.
He's just playing with a piece of wood. That's it.
Technically, no, it's not a firearm. It is a display piece.
It's a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Walker Fletcher's in, says good evening, everyone. Joe Arledge said hi, everybody. Barbara Frazier said, hey, how you doing this afternoon?
We're here.
the Salvador 45 said one of these days, and that's where we're at.
Hey, yeah, Salvador was just up here. We just had a little event at Fort Laramie. Doing kind of they call it a Civil War event, technically post-Civil War. We was doing 1866, so opening a Red Clouds War, that was a pretty fun event. But, yeah, Stephen Mountain Man, there's your proof of life. I just got to get it mailed.
So did you get to did you reenact Fetterman or what wagon?
No, we was just this was pre-Fetterman.
Okay.
So this is just the opening of it up. So one of the things that I had kind of talked about, because I did a special program which was Weapons of Red Clouds War. So this chat ties right into all that. And Duelist 1954 did a video on that as well. But anyway, one of the things I'd mentioned is, that the natives were attacking wagon trains up along the Bozeman Trail, and we were portraying that day in August. So one of the things that I tried to get folks to talk about is the fact there was a wagon train, two wagon trains that had just been attacked. One with 5 men killed, one with 15 killed and 5 wounded. Only days before that, so it was really things were starting to get hot up in that part of the country. But yeah, it was a pretty good event. And then we started our evening tours again with that. We had about 50 some odd people, so it was good. It was a good turnout.
Yeah. Did you march around with your 3-band muzzleloaders? I
didn't. I was a scout.
Oh, so did you march around with your 1860 Henry?
Yes, I did.
I guess.
Yep. That was part of our skit we did that night. So in that skit, I was in the Post Trader store. And so we do this little 5-minute vignette, tour groups come through. And it has to be something that's actually historically happened at Fort Laramie or some other fort in the same time period. And my skit was one that actually took place inside Fort Laramie with the kid that had come out with the 11th Ohio. And it was almost word for word, all of it, although it was condensed down because the beginning of the skit and the end of the skit actually was 2 different conversations that were about 6 months apart. But anyway, we put it together. I played old Nick Janice on that one. And in fact, Saboteur was in on that. He was in there in the trade room. And yeah, part of that, I had the Saboteur 66, and I had my 60 Henry on the thing. And that's how we opened the skit, was just kind of a conversation between me and the Post Trader about, difference between the 66 and the Henry.
Did you sell to him that 66 was way better?
Oh, that's what they were trying to, because I wasn't portraying the trader. I was portraying a scout. Nick Janice, he was a fell out to play, was a scout and an interpreter for Fort Laramie on occasion, but had to put on a good French Canadian accent.
Did you tell him if he drops it from the saddle this way, you only ruin half the tube?
That's true. You can replace that part. But no, yeah, we was doing that, and so yeah, it was good. It was fun. But I kind of wish that, because Ostrander was the private I was interacting with, the other character, he was talking about how Janice was teasing him about his Smith & Wesson #1 tip up. I was sitting there thinking, I was like, God, why couldn't Garrett come to visit me this weekend?
Should have. Did you tell him you had some experience with that Smith & Wesson #1?
Yep, I sure did. We actually used my 49 pocket for it, but yeah, no, somebody had asked me about that out there when I was doing the Weapons of Red Clouds War, and it's like, well, so the soldiers carry those? Yeah, they did. Well, what good were they for? And I said, killing mice.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, when you can shoot a steel plate at 5 feet and the plate doesn't move.
Hey, I have taken that pistol out to 30 yards and hit the target, but you really had to be listening close to be able to hit it.
At about 45-degree angle.
I'm pretty sure that the BB gun was louder at that range.
Yeah. Probably hit harder too.
The charge.
Yep. So
how did the Smith & Wesson Model 1 play into somebody there was documented to have that?
Yeah, it was a private Ostrander with the 11th Ohio Volunteer Cav.
Of course,
And
it was.
I think he was with the 11th. Anyway, he managed to get transferred around and sent out. No, excuse me, he wasn't with the 11th Ohio. He was with another group. He got transferred out there just after the 11th Ohio left. That was what the deal was. But anyway, yeah, he only had another year left in his service, and so he mustered out there at at Fort Phil Kearny. He mustered out and was given the job as a clerk. Then he wound up back at Fort Laramie the following year and got out of there. But he talks about killing a buffalo, and he said that the lieutenant that he was assigned to had given him, and he doesn't specify what the rifle is, just said he borrowed his rifle, and he said that he shot the buffalo, replaced the cartridge, and then gave the lieutenant the gun back. And it doesn't say what gun he had, if it was a Sharps, if it was a metallic like a Spencer or a Henry, but he said he did replace the cartridge, but he shot the buffalo in the spine and dropped him lights out. And he's a year too early for a Allen conversion, so I don't know what he had.
Like in a 65 or 66?
Yeah.
If it was in a 66, it was probably in 4440. Little inside joke.
So, was it without reading it? Was it read like I replaced the cartridge I used to the officer, or I replaced a cartridge in the gun?
He put the cartridge in the gun. He replaced the cartridge in the gun. So, if I can find the book, I just had it here. Give me a quick second. I'll go ahead and read comments off while I'm doing that.
All right. Stephen M. Mann said he wasn't holding his breath. James Singer said, good evening from South Carolina. Hi. Walks Fletcher said, I still have my Lincoln log 60 years plus. Chris Klein said, hello. Sorry, I'm running late. Don't worry. We were running late too. Black Powder Firearms said, I'm back. Wi-Fi keeps kicking me out. Oh, that's not good. And the Sabater 45 says, think he means a Spencer. And Todd B said, when did Sharp start using metallic cartridges? All good questions there.
But he does. He says cartridge. They could be referring to a paper cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
I find it on a Spencer, it would be a little weird to replace one cartridge. I mean, I guess you would, but.
Okay, let's see here.
But Saboteur seems to think he meant Spencer. Correct me if I'm wrong, Duke. I'm not a Sharps expert, but I believe 1868. No.
Oh yeah, that's about the time they started converting things. Yeah, because they converted them to 50-70.
In 67.
Yeah, so 68 would have been when they started being really available.
Probably for civilians, 68. I don't know. I don't have much on the Sharps.
Okay,
actually, yes.
9 Mile Ranch.
Yes, I actually do have something on that. Hang on. Duke's not the only one with books.
In the words of my good friend Samuel Walker, that's not fair. They've been reading books.
So just to kind of carry on what we were doing while you're looking there, Ethan, just for anybody in the chat that doesn't know, when we were just talking about a Smith & Wesson #1, Ethan, explain to the chat what a Smith & Wesson #1 is and how it's the greatest ever.
Oh, well, if I had one here with me, I could elaborate, but unfortunately, it's over at the studio.
But it wasn't a buffalo; it was a steer.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says, at the crack of my rifle, the steer's head dropped as if it was cut off by a guillotine. The legs of the animal bent under him, and his body pitched forward right over his head, and over he rolled without so much as making a kick. Shout went up. Several men rushed up with knives to cut the skin of my kill. I threw out the empty shell and trotted over to camp to put the gun in the ambulance. As I turned around, Lieutenant Arnold stood there with a smile on his face. Had to be in the Spencer then.
There you go.
Could have been a rolling block.
It's the 66.
Ah, okay. Not a rolling block then.
Rolling blocks. There were rolling blocks, split breech rimfire rolling blocks at the time.
Yeah, this is July of 66, so I'm going to guess it's probably a Spencer.
Go with the most common thing at that time.
Yeah, but it's funny. He doesn't describe the rifle, but he does describe that little Smith & Wesson tip-up.
So,
because they're a sight to behold.
just looking at this to answer the other questions. Well, of course, there was the 1870 model Sharps, but I'm not sure if that's the carbine.
But if anybody's curious as to what book that was, it's An Army Boy in the 60s by Olson B. Ostrander.
Did he say
that's the skit that we was doing there that night was the interaction between him and Nick Janice.
Did he say he threw the cartridge out, or he pulled the cartridge, or he ejected it?
Kicked the cartridge out, yeah. Now you gotta maybe go find the page again. I only spent 5 minutes the first time looking for it.
Well, shouldn't the Spencer have ejected the casing?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he was going to get that detailed.
Oh, well, that's true.
He wasn't going to go that deep. Oh, there's carbine.
Yeah, it says he threw out the empty shell.
Yeah.
So it could have been Henry. He went chink, and the shell goes wing.
Yep.
Or with a Spencer too, they'll kind of chink out of there.
Yeah, kind of tumble out.
So yeah, I've been adding to the book collection, and that was one of them. Because after I found out that it came out of his book, what we were doing that night, I went ahead and ordered it, and of course it showed up after the event. But I got it.
Yep. I'm still trying to nail down exactly when. Just give me a second.
Well, I know the, what was it, the 4490 came out in 69. And it was in 1869. So actually the Sharps, it gets called the 1874. It's actually a copy of the 1869 model Sharps. It's when they first started producing the ones that looked like that. But if I remember right, it was 1874 was the first one that was in the 4570. And then the 4590 come out later in the 70s. But most of the Sharps were 5070 there in the early days that were converted.
The funny thing is the Sharps and the Spencers are so close in design that I get confused when I'm looking at the pictures.
No, Christian Spencer definitely copied the Sharps design.
Yeah.
Absolutely copied it.
So we were talking about trapdoors earlier today, and I went and looked up the Berdan rifle. The Berdan 1 is pretty much just a Springfield trapdoor, but a little more streamlined.
Yeah.
Without a hammer.
Yep.
But yeah, if you look, if I remember right, most parts on a Spencer are interchangeable with a Sharps with only slight modifications. The lever's about the same.
Yeah.
The hammer's the same. Or almost the same, yeah.
Actually, Sharps tried to put out a rimfire metallic cartridge in 1858, but the Ordnance Department didn't want it.
Yeah, they did do that. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Sharps, they were doing a lot of stuff. They were around for a while. What was it? 49 is when they really got started. And out there at the fort, we got a 1851 sporting model, which is in 40 caliber.
They started converting in February of 1868, the carbines.
Yep.
50-70. So, yeah. Anyway, there we go. So, 1868 seems like a good place to start, even though there could have been more. 66 to 68, you really have a hard time getting centerfire stuff before. I have a hard time finding anything centerfire before 66 in a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think 5070 was first centerfire.
Well, it very well could have been. The only guy I can think, the 450 Adams might have been a little earlier, but I can't remember. I think it was 68 too. But for the British, not for us.
Wasn't the first. It was very, very close to it.
Yeah. On the internet, never say the first, the biggest, or the best, because somebody will find something.
Yeah, so so correct me if I'm wrong, and the guy asked me out there at the fort, and I always thought it was the progression of the 22 was 22 short come out first, 22 long come out next, and long rifle came out later in the 1880s.
Well, you mentioned the Flaubert cartridge.
Yeah.
That one came out first, but I personally, this is my opinion, I don't put the Flaubert cartridge as a real cartridge because, and I have people jump my case about that all the time. I say the 22 short was the first true rimfire cartridge. And what I mean by that is the 22 rimfire was the first one that had primer, propellant, and projectile in case. The Flaubert had a primer, a case, and a projectile, no propellant. The primer was the propellant. And they were used in parlor guns. They were literally designed to be shot in the living room. So I don't really consider that a true cartridge.
Well, anyway, the guy was trying to tell me that it came out, the 22 short come out, and then they made the 22 long rifle a few years later, and then the 22 long come out in the 1880s. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that the long rifle come out last.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
And then 22 Magnum came out after that.
Yeah.
Uncle Chaw has a question here. He said, how many Springfield muskets made it out west in muzzleloader fashion were most converted?
Oh, there was a lot that come out west. The entire 18th U.S. Infantry was armed with them that was out here on the Bozeman Trail. So they came out in 66. They were replaced with the Allens up on the Bozeman Trail in 67. So once they replaced them, those old muskets would have been boxed up, shipped back, and probably went back and were inspected, and those that were deemed serviceable were probably converted.
Well, a lot of people don't realize is the 66 Springfield model for Allen Type 1 is actually made in 1867 and doesn't get out west until July of 1867.
I sure like
yeah.
6.
The other thing is when you're talking about converted, they never really took. We picture conversion like them taking a full Springfield musket, cutting it up, and that's not how they really did it. They took stocks and usually brand new locks and a good barrel, a good stock, and usually a brand new lock that had never been issued in the Civil War. Sometimes they had been later on, but especially in the early ones in the 66s, you'll notice that in the 66s, a lot of the locks actually say 1865 on them because they're actually made post-war. But as they would take the best of everything, and they didn't necessarily take all the pieces from one matching musket and put them together. And then by the time you get into the 68, they've already started making new barrels. So when they send it back, it's not like the conversion process. I had to learn that too. It's not like a conversion process like we think. Like, here's a whole Civil War musket, cut the top out of it, put a door on it, and this whole musket is now a trap door.
Now, what about that 1865 58 rimfire that you got?
Okay, so that is a little bit different, but even those, I'm not going to show this. I just have to look off camera here for my own. Yes, that has an 1865 dated lock plate on it, so it is not a true one, but the 68 actually has an 1863 dated lock plate. So they did go back and start using older lock plates, but not right off the bat.
Okay.
And different hammers,
as they could. Yeah, they had to have a new hammer on them because the hammers are totally different configuration than what the percussion hammer was.
Yeah, but they literally just took the best of everything they could find.
Yep.
They disassemble those rifles. They weren't really sitting on a rack per se, full rifle. The rifles would all be disassembled so that they could see every part, and every bin had a screw, and every bin had a hammer. And that's kind of how a lot of them actually sat in the warehouse. Because, I mean, can you imagine there was over 1 million of those muskets? Could you imagine storing and maintaining 1 million muskets in full form?
Yep.
We've seen what happens when people try to do that, Garrett.
Sorry, I'm taking over there, but go ahead.
Worries.
The question was, how many muzzle Springfield muskets made it out west in muzzleloader fashion?
Uncountable number. Because down at Fort Larned, they would have had muskets down there before they got the Allen conversion. So there was a lot of them made it out west. 40, 50, 60,000, I don't know. And that's one we may not ever be able to really find out the actual answer. Well, if somebody wants to sit there and count Army ordnance records and where they all went, they could do that, but not on this channel.
Well, that's also not counting the amount of surplus that came out in civilian hands, too. There's a lot of them surplus floating around, too.
But, because there would have been
in civilian hands,
63s, infields were out here. There was a lot of infields. The 11th Ohio, or not 11th Ohio, the 18th Infantry had a lot of infields, too. So it was a mix.
But to be honest, if you're a civilian, especially in the 1860s, you're getting your hands on a sharp just as quick as you can, because they aren't going to have any trapdoors even surplus for another 4 or 5 years. So
the books, the records show that on the Bozeman Trail, most civilians were armed with Spencers or Henrys, especially Teamsters that were working for the Army. They either had a Spencer carbine or rifle or a Henry rifle. One guy had all three. Or both. He had two Spencers and a Henry, and 3 Colt revolvers tucked in his belt. He was at the wagon box fight.
Well, that was interesting because you remember when I was talking to you the other day, we were talking about the surplusing of the Spencers, and I was like, I'm pretty sure they surplus it. Well, I wasn't thinking the Type 1 Spencers.
Yeah,
surplus
the 1865. They had new Spencers. Yeah.
So the 5656 instead of the 5650, those were in civilian hands early, I believe.
Yeah, and they don't specify but Spencer was selling to the civilian market too.
Yeah.
Same as Henry. There was call for it on the civilian market. Let's see here.
Leroy Frazier's in. He said, Dryball Jimmy here. Good evening, guys.
All right, 423.
I'll get to that question, D.
Wagon box, 423. All right. Or maybe it was Hayfield fight that the guy had all of them, but anyway, so in McDermott's second volume on Red Cloud's War, the chapter titled 8 Hours in Hell is the wagon box fight. And being that I'm at the beginning of that chapter, I'm going to venture and guess that it was actually the Hayfield where I read about the guy with the 2 Spencers and the Henry. So we'll go back to Hayfield here. What page is that on?
Yeah, the Spencer, not at all an uncommon gun in civilian hands. That's why we always have to differentiate when people talk about, arms in the West. The military is always going to have one thing and the civilian's always going to have the other. And not necessarily one arm is suited better to the other.
And there was the 2 guys that died, the 2 civilians that died at the Fetterman fight that had Henrys. Okay. And if anybody's curious, there's another quote in this book that says that the Remingtons were junk and the soldiers didn't like them.
No.
There's a couple books with that, actually, Duke.
Don't you know?
Talking about arms in Indian Wars? Yeah, nobody liked the Remingtons out here in the West.
He must have ran out of Crisco.
We got it. Here in a minute, we got a question for you, Duke, about a book, but Sabador is referring to the gun that was used to shoot the steer. He said page 122 before he mentions the lieutenant hands him his Spencer, page 120 and 122.
I think it is, but for me, that shows up on page 102. So I think you and I got different versions of the book. Well, I've got the cheap copy of the book.
Yeah. Greg Pilgrim says, hey.
Hey, Greg Pilgrim.
Oregon Outback said, I often wondered why the natives didn't build an arrow manufacturing plant.
They did make some firearms factory.
They didn't have to, because at that point they were buying them from the from the settlers. A lot of, or correct me if I'm wrong, Duke. They were taking the rims and stuff off of wheels so that they could punch them out of those.
Arrowheads? Oh yeah.
Yeah, anything
Barrel
they get their
bands.
hands on.
Barrel bands.
Not wheel. Barrel
Butt
bands. Punch
plates.
them out of barrel bands.
Barrel bands. Butt plates. And when I say barrel bands, not gun barrel bands, wooden keg barrel bands. Sheet metal skillets.
Yeah.
They'd buy a file, 4 or 5 metal barrel bands, go to work, make some arrowheads.
Saboteur said that he got the one on Google Books.
Yeah, I got the big bites copy, so that's like it's the cheap one. It never lines up on the pages. But if you say it's in there, it's a Spencer. That's what it was. It's a Spencer. I'm not gonna dig around in there to figure out.
You ready for?
Took me that long to find the one quote I was looking for.
Why?
You ready for a question, Duke?
Go for it.
Okay, D wanted to know, Duke, is Commerce of the Prairies a good book?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a really great book. And he's the one talks about Patterson's, probably the earliest reference to Patterson's out in the West in 38. And he had a pair of pistols and a rifle, and his brother had the exact same with spare cylinders for both. And so he says between the two of them, each had 36 rounds of ammunition readily loaded, which was the most that anybody packed readily loaded anywhere on the plains at that time. And then he talks about shooting at a prairie dog to try and impress a Comanche Indian about how fast he could shoot. And the Indian just took up his bow and fired 5 arrows just as fast as he had fired the 5 rounds out of the Patterson revolver. So didn't really impress him none.
I hate it when that happens.
Okay, let's see here. Yeah, here's the one quote. Says the troops carried the new 50 caliber modified Springfield breech loading rifle musket, which greatly increased the rapidity of fire, promised to outperform most antiquated weapons such as those carried by the Plains Indians. On July 30th, 2nd Lieutenant Sigmund Sternberg of Company G, 27th Infantry, was placed in charge of the detachment. Oh, that's the detachment for the hayfield. Okay. Let's see here. I'm trying to find the quote about the guy with all the guns.
According to a lot of studies I've read at this point, the Indians are still, especially in 1867, still mostly armed with Lehman muzzleloaders for the most part.
Yeah. And at this point, they would have had a handful of Spencers, because they'd have picked them up off of the second cab soldiers, which was just under 40. See, there's 49 infantry, 80 men, so that was 30 minus. There's 31. You take the 2 civilians, that's 29. Something like 29 cav soldiers, so they got 29 Spencers.
Mm.
Well, then you subtract the 2 officers.
You guys,
yeah, they got a handful of Spencers out of the Fetterman fight, and then whatever else they pick off of immigrants coming through, because like I said, immigrants were carrying lots of them.
You have to wonder how much ammo they could have possibly have used though, or had at that point for those. Does anybody ever talk about that in your research?
What's that?
How much ammo they would have had for those Spencers after the Fetterman fight? Because you got to think the soldiers used up a piece of it.
They wouldn't have had very much.
Yeah.
Not very much at all, yeah.
Texan 1836 has a question here. He said, what was the most surplus weapon post-Civil War?
Remingtons. A lot of Remingtons.
I forgot about that because they didn't surplus the Colts for forever.
Yeah. No, they had purchased over 200,000 units of both Colts and Remingtons. Colt beats out Remington by like just a few 10,000s somewhere in there. What was it, 20 or 30,000 difference?
Yeah.
But they surplus a good number of the Remingtons. Now, the 7th Cav had the Remingtons afterwards. They still had some in service, but they surplused a lot of Remingtons, which is why they were so cheap on the civilian market. And everybody says, well, everybody preferred Remingtons because everybody was carrying one at that time period. And it's like, no, they were surplus and they were cheap.
Yeah.
Oh, high points of.
Just on that note here in the Frasca book, I actually came across a page the other day that as far as U.S. military surplus. Okay. This was the surplus rate, page 325. This is the stuff surplus between 65 and September, between April of 1865 and September 20th of 1870. Surplus 726 Star rifles or carbines first class, 58 Star second class, 41 Burnsides, 44 second class Burnsides. They surplused over 928 Sharps rifles. They surplused 2,391 1855s, 2,680 1861s. This is just the civilians, by the way. This is not the surplus to other nations. That's where the big numbers are.
Right.
But they surplused 4,000 Model 1863s. They surplused 5,000 unspecified caliber 58s.
Okay. And actually, I just found the earliest that I know of record for a 66 Winchester being used in the Indian Wars, and that was Hayfield here. Go ahead and read yours off, Garrett.
Oh, I just find it interesting that in 1868 they surplused 114 1803 Harper Ferry rifles.
Those are a little old.
Yeah. They must have just been sitting around. They surplused in 1869. They surplused 4,080 incomplete 1855s with the Maynard primer system removed.
Wow.
Those are the big numbers are on those.
Right.
They didn't surplus. Funny, they didn't surplus hardly. They only surplus 20 of the Colt contract rifles. Okay. Pistols surplus between 1865 and 1870. Remington Army and Navy, 23,820. And that's it. They didn't surplus a single Colt in that time.
Wow. I might have to have you send me that.
Yeah, that's
so anyway,
I would say honestly the most that I read there that they surplus was Model 1864s,
right?
Springfield rifles, and it looks like that, and the what was I just saying? And the 1855s with the Maynard system removed, that made up a lot of it. But that's not count. That's just the civilian surplus, guys. That's not the surplus. Like they sold guns to other countries. That's what they preferred to do in bulk.
Right. So yeah, I'm going to read this one off here. This is the civilians had at the Hayfield fight. There were a number of them there. So the civilian first one they got is Zeke Colvin, carried an infield muzzleloader he picked up at Wilson's Creek. Burnett and Howard had Spencer carbines. Wheeling has a Spencer rifle. Duncan and Little had Winchester rifles. So this is the first 66 Winchesters. So they're at Hayfield fight. Al Colvin had a Henry repeater, and William Hain a Ballard breechloader. All had Colt sidearms, and several had double-barrel shotguns. Burnett had Layton's double-barrel 10-gauge shotgun loaded with charges of 16 buckshot.
Huh.
So 16 buckshot pellets. Most of your buckshot charges are 9. So that's a 2-ounce load. That's going to whap you.
I take it that's a muzzleloader shotgun.
Had to have been, yeah.
At that point, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I don't think when did the first cartridge shotgun come out?
The Europeans were sending them over pretty early.
The first official one came out in, I think, 1810, but they only made they didn't make very many of them. But commercially successful? I don't know.
Because that's not something you're going to easily convert.
No. I mean, technically, the first centerfire was a a shotgun.
Well, I mean, the meteorite or whatever they call it, Belgium shotguns were coming over pretty early, like early 1870s. I think they're called meteor or whatever. But I don't know about American. You'd have to look up like when were the Parkers and guns like that first coming out, because they were pretty early. Thinking about it, in Britain, the Purdy shotguns, Purdy, were out pretty early.
They were out pretty early?
Purdy shotguns out pretty early, and they were Purdy. But you're talking like late 1860s, so with brass cartridges. Todd B said, I think the 44 Henry rimfire round was manufactured through the 1930s. It must have been a good round.
So here's what they had at the wagon box. So it says the men of the 27th Infantry were armed with a new breech-loading Allen Springfield rifle musket, which they had received the day before. Oh, geez, they didn't even have time to practice.
No, it was there and go.
Yeah. They had 7,000 rounds in the wagon on July 31st. Mm-hmm. So the metal cartridges contained black powder, and after each volley, there was a heavy curtain of smoke. Civilians had other sorts of arms. R.J. Smith had 2 Spencer carbines and 2 6-shot Army Colt revolvers.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guy you want next to you in the fight. Tom Mallory had 2 firearms of his own, a Spencer carbine and a Henry rifle.
It was excellent next to me.
Yeah. Excellent marksman, was therefore provided with the rifles of the dead and wounded, all of which he kept hot from his position behind a pile of ox yokes. William Holmes had a Spencer, Frank Peach and Frank Gordon had Henry repeaters. So,
that kind of goes, though, because, I had heard that they'd had them for 2 days for their conversions. And that kind of goes to show you a good reason, instead of adapting a whole new rifle, to just convert the one that they know, because they held their own with that fight with zero training on how that gun worked. And it's just so simple.
Yep.
You throw the lever, you put another cartridge in.
But the rifles had become available a few weeks earlier, but I guess the ones that they went to Fort C.F. Smith first.
Yeah, I had heard that they came slowly. A lot of the outfits won't even receive their 1866s till 1868, 1869, when they're already obsolete. In the Modoc Wars in 1873, they're still turning 1866s in and getting 1868s in early 1873.
Right. Let's see here. Yeah, up at Hayfield, they got them just a little bit earlier, but not by much.
By what, 5 days earlier?
Yeah, just a few days. So, so that's part of the arms that you're going to see up there on Red Cloud's War. And then, of course, like I said, Fetterman fight, I'm pretty sure the 2nd Cav had Remington revolvers, because you see there was a letter that's in Volume 1, which I got out at the fort. I don't have it here. Where C.C. Agur, who was I think he was the district commander. He was one of the commanders in charge of that area. Had received a letter basically stating that, or had sent a letter stating that the Remington arms and service were in poor condition, that the soldiers had no faith in them because they were so bad in their use. But the officers, from what I've seen, most of the officers had Colts.
Yeah, there's some pretty nasty letters, especially written from down in New Mexico and Arizona. Where in the world are we going to get Colts? And I kind of wonder if they hadn't, at that point, not only were they built poorly, like we've discussed a lot early in the war, the Remingtons, you also have to imagine that within about 5 years, they pretty used up.
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah, well, I mean, they come out in 63.
Yeah.
So by 66, they've only been in use for 3 years.
That's true.
But the Colts are in the same, their Colts have been out there for that long, if not a little longer. And, they're still up and running at the end of the war.
Greg Pilgrim said, howdy, guys. Chris Klein asks, what would you say is the most common civilian handgun of the time? And I believe he's talking about, I guess he would mean the time being the Northern Indian Wars, what we're discussing.
A lot of Colts.
Yep.
Just a lot of Colts.
41 pocket model.
And like we just said, a lot of Remingtons, too, that are surplus.
And the thing of it is that Remingtons, when you start getting into the cartridge era, the Remingtons start to really disappear after 1873. They just start getting less and less commonplace. I mean, they're out there, but by the time you get, especially in the 1880s, everybody's got a Colt.
Yeah. Would you say that during the during the Indian Wars era, the civilians, would you say they leaned on handguns as much as they did long guns to begin with? I mean, if you can only afford one, you're probably going to get a long gun, right?
Yeah. You see, there's a few people that talk about having revolvers out west, but most like families coming across, they're just carrying a shotgun and a rifle. Some are bringing a handgun with them. But, it's wild territory, so handgun can come in handy when things are up close and personal. But most of them are just bringing the old farm gun across the plains with them.
Do you think you're going to see, obviously, civilians are going to go for the cheaper option? So, like Ethan said, of course, 49 pocket models early on, and probably some Smith & Wesson Model 1s, wouldn't you think?
Well, there's a few of them recorded out here, but not a lot of them.
I think the Smith & Wessons mostly stayed kind of back east.
Hard to get cartridges for, I guess.
Yeah.
My phone's doing its little overheating thing again, so I'm going to hope I don't have to shut off of here.
Okay.
I'm going to take it out of its case and let it be in the open air, and maybe that'll help.
Billy Allen asks, how common were the Gimmer Sharps? I want to get one built.
Not very common. You see a few of them, but not a lot of them. There is an example of a Gimmer Spencer, which it was in, I think I said 50-90, so they weren't using the tube magazine anymore at that point. But, you could use it like a single shot sharp.
There's a few Gimmer rolling blocks. I know though.
Yeah.
Gimmer Hockey.
Gray Pilgrim said, imagine if the natives had a foundry.
Well, not a foundry, but in King's Philip's War, that was frowned upon.
Gray Pilgrim asked, how many had Frank Wessons?
Um,
that was actually a pretty common gun, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I've never seen one referenced, but
if memory serves me right,
definitely one at Little Bighorn on the native.
I was going to say, there's one at Little Bighorn.
And they just show up so often, you got to think they're pretty common. Dr. Durrell Shepard just put a video out on that. The Frank Wesson medium range rifle. And just the numbers I think he was quoting on there were pretty impressive, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Doug Dukes asked, Garrett, what book is that? That is the 4570 Springfield Book 2 by Al Frasca. Let's see here. We're scrolling on down here, see if there's any questions for Duke, guys. Oh, Mill Creek Range is in. Hi, Benji. Hey, Benji, that was one of your bullets that I made that 350-yard shot with, I think, the other day. Must have been a pretty good one. He said he's enjoying a cigar on the patio in the hotel here in Kansas City.
Casey.
Yeah, Gray Pilgrim said it was 100 degrees today. When is Duke writing a book?
Whenever I get a computer. So if anybody wants to contribute to the computer fund, let me know.
Texan 1836 says, what is Ethan not fiddling with? What are you not fiddling with, Ethan?
He's not fiddling with a wheel lock.
Definitely.
He's fiddling with a piece of cast from a shop that makes rifles.
Yeah, and a piece of wood.
Oh,
Oh, knock that piece of firewood off his shoulder.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, seriously though, yeah. As soon as I get a computer up, I'm going to start doing some writing here. But I know some people have offered me older computers, but I'm kind of at the point where it's like if I'm going to start getting video production done,
yeah.
again,
You don't want an old
regularly, I'm going to have to go with a newer one.
You do not want an old computer for that. I found out the hard way.
Yeah, because I got a desktop back home and it's 2015 and it's already outdated for some of the video stuff I do. So
The one that we used to use until about a year ago was a 2004.
yeah,
Because it's made a few. It's been dropped a few times out of a few airplanes into a few different countries.
Try making an hour-long history of the handguns of Colt on that computer.
If you touch the screen wrong, the whole computer shuts down.
yep.
Okay.
Matter of fact, that was the one I had whenever we went up to visit you that one time.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yep.
D has a question. He said, "Did Bannerman ship anything out west?"
That one I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. Like more than anybody else or anything. I'm going to go look through historic pictures. Go look for 66 trapdoors in civilian hands. Those cut down Bannermans are everywhere after about 1870. Geronimo had a Bannerman cut down in his picture, even though it wasn't actually his. It was the photographer, the one where he's kneeling down with the photographer actually stopped by Bannerman's Island and picked up a bunch of those to take stage photos with.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get some frozen Brussels sprouts to cool my phone off.
Okay. A few more see here. Looking down here. Billy Allen said 51 Navies, 60 Armies, probably the most common civilian. Yes, to the 51 Navies, not so much to the 60 Armies, because of the 200,000 some that were made, and I can't remember off the top of my head, I want to say 224,000 that were made. 119,000 of those were bought outright by the Union military, and probably around another 80 or 90,000 of those were sold to states and state militias. And they did not surplus those dudes after the war, as we were just talking. They hung on to those things for a long time because they felt they were better. And, they were actually petitioning Colt to not make them more guns after the war, but make them parts. And the funny thing is, a lot of them stayed out east and they shipped the Remingtons to the guys that are fighting out west. And there's a lot of contention about that. But yeah, the 51 Navies, definitely.
I know what happened there. Oh, you're the new guys? Yeah, we're gonna send you out west and give you a Remington. We're keeping our Colts and we're staying back here during the peacetime.
And ripped gear.
Well, they could switch the cylinders in the Remingtons.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. We're gonna get
said Ethan rocks. Mill Creek Range said, "I can send you a typewriter, Duke. Write that book old style."
I ain't got. Oh God.
Duke don't want no Remington
so much
typewriter.
We used to
typewriter.
Being at old typewriters, I always get my fingers hung up in them dadgum things.
Oregon Outback said Ethan stopped dropping that thing out of airplanes.
Yeah, I have. I've retired it. Now it just has
Isn't there a Gary Allen song about that?
I don't know.
I'm just sitting out here dropping airplanes.
Dropping laptops out of airplanes. I guess that's all our comments for the moment. I guess we can get back to the subject at hand, but I can't remember what it was other than guns in the Indian Wars. Let's talk about Indian guns in the Indian Wars, Duke. That's what I want to hear about. Did you do that in your speech?
Well, all over my chair. Yeah.
Whatever they took off dead soldiers or dead civilians. Yeah, that was kind of a mix. That was a hodgepodge. So during Red Cloud's War, most of them are going to be muzzle loaders of one variety or another. And then once you start getting closer to the Great Stew Wars, they're starting to get their hands on more and more repeaters because there's a few guys, possibly one of the guys that I was portraying the other night, the Genesis, that were trading arms and ammunition to the so-called hostiles at that time, which was Crazy Horses bands and some of the Northern Cheyenne and Sitting Bulls bands. But yeah, and then who is it? Louis Bordeaux. Louis Bordeaux, Jim Bordeaux's son, was caught trading arms and ammunition just a few miles from Red Cloud Agency.
So what about the ones they're getting from Canada?
There's that too.
So yeah,
but Frank Gerard kind of tells how that all went. Sitting Bull tried to get the Métis to come down with arms and ammunition to trade, and the Métis brought mostly alcohol, and Frank Gerard supposedly said, he was such a what the hell is it? Such against alcohol because he was raised as a Mormon that he turned him in.
Yep.
So,
how do you feel? Northwest Trade Gun still prominent to the most part, as far as
yeah, anyway. Yeah, they were making the flintlock ones up until 1875 at least.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
A couple questions here. CBJW said, Ethan, tell us about how many 44 Henry Smith & Wessons were made.
Well, there were 44 Henry Smith & Wessons made, and let me see here. That book is probably upstairs. I believe the number is pretty low. I know most of them. Well, the original number of number 3 Americans chambered in 44 Henry, I believe, was somewhere like 800 to 1,000. And then they went over to 44 American, and then the Russians wanted 44 Russian, and then the Turks wanted 44 Russian, or they wanted Russian revolvers, but they wanted them in 44 Henry. And I don't remember how many of those there were made.
They wanted in the Russian.
Yeah. Colt Boys smoked you in the 44 Henry department then, Ethan.
Do what?
Because we made 7,044 Henry revolvers straight up for the U.S. military.
Well, guess what?
They didn't take them.
Smith & Wesson figures out. Smith & Wesson figures out once they get that 44 American and 44 Russian that they really like center fire. Matter of fact, they're going to argue with the Turks about you're going backwards. You're going the wrong direction. We don't want healed bullets and we don't want rimfires. But the Turks got their way.
Like a lot of people have a hard time, especially the guys that love the 66, have a hard time believing that by about 1870, the rimfire cartridge was absolutely as obsolete as could be.
Yeah.
Well, it was obsolete, but it was still being produced because there's them old holdouts that just keep on hanging on.
I'm talking military-wise, like Ethan and I were just talking about. Colt tried to push rimfires on the U.S. military. They wouldn't take them. But as you were just saying, Smith & Wesson was trying to push center fires on European militaries.
And
Britain was already using full-on 450 Adams. They were already using center fire cartridges way before that. But yeah, they were, and what I've read is they were difficult and expensive to ship because you had to have each one in a separate container so they didn't rattle together. And that was one of the things the military honestly said we have to look at. It's harder to ship rimfires than center fires. Texan 1836 said he didn't even want to know why Snapper just woke up. That's just Snapper's routine.
Yeah.
Snapper's a night owl.
He is. It's pretty handy when you're working late hours. You're like, oh, I'm bored. Who's going to call? Snapper.
Saboteur said Brazil liked the 44 Henry. I've heard that.
Yeah.
So that's all the comments. You know, all this time, Duke, and you haven't told us anything about the greatest firearm of the Indian Wars.
Which one?
What in your mind is the greatest firearm of the Indian Wars?
Probably the Winchesters or the Henrys, because they actually did some pretty good work.
That's not what I'm talking about.
And then there's the Colt Single Action Army.
Now, there you go. There you go.
I'm just sitting here waiting to hear trapdoors.
That's why I thought he was going with it, and I was going to go all the way around.
I didn't say the best military and most popular military firearm of the time. Well, when I say popular, I mean populous, as the most of them out there. But
when you read the accounts, the popularity of the 73 trapdoor at that time was about as popular as the M16 was at the beginning of Vietnam.
Well, it depends on the account you read, because a lot of accounts early on, when they got the 50-70, they like that dude a lot. Now, obviously, when they go down to 45, they complain a lot about that. They complain about the gilded metal stuff right off the bat. But there's this point early on when it's really popular, and then it gets popular towards the end for some reason again.
Yeah.
It's all the old timers who's still holding on to their trapdoors and using them so they can tell them young whippersnappers that
that's exactly
I'm all trapdoor.
Yeah. But yeah, during that early period of the 1873, when they're still hammering out the width of the receiver, yeah, there's some issues, and guys don't like them. We were back talking about, and before I started talking too much again, we started talking about the single action army there, Dick.
Yeah. So yeah, it was come out, of course, in 1873, was issued by 1874, starting to be issued out. And, it's going to stick with the Army for 20 some years, or just about 20 years. Yeah. Which it and the trapdoor, they're going to serve about the same length in the U.S. military.
Yep. Both going to make a comeback in the Spanish-American War.
Yep.
Well, the trapdoor is going to have almost 10 years before it, but in different variations. But yeah.
Right.
For the most part.
But, the military used that. It proved itself quite a bit. A lot of people loved it. But, it did have some issues, and there are lots of accounts of soldiers shooting themselves. And some of it's, they say it's a failure of the safety. Others say it's a failure of the trooper. Either way, eventually they go to the load in the 5, which I got to find when they did that. I don't know if that was when they made changes in 1882 or if that was, or the early 1880s anyway. But yeah, they made some changes to it, and they went to load in 5 and, went to the Schofield round, which actually my single action army loves the Schofield round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds to me like that was an operator headspace and timing issue.
What, my gun loving a Schofield round?
No.
No, the soldier shooting himself.
Oh, yeah. So there's the one account, the first on the Rosebud campaign, where Crook winds up getting hit at the Rosebud. When they started out, the first soldier that dies is one that he took his belt off because he was on a woodcutting detail. Took his belt off with his gun on it, threw it down on the ground. The gun went off and hit him just above the hip bone, and the bullet lodged. I think it said it hit him in the liver on the other side.
But knowing soldiers the way I do, that's his story. What happened to you?
No, he wasn't conscious for it. It was a story of the other guys, and they kind of figured out what happened. But, they picked him up. His gun was on the ground, and he was. It was a long, agonizing death.
Not the way to go. That happened a lot back in the day. The gun falling out of the wagon. Like probably it seems like 50% of the people shot to death in the West was because their gun fell and shot them.
Yeah, and that was
That's a
one
lot.
of the bigger causes of death on the Oregon Trail too. But then what was it? Counts the soldiers shooting themselves when they draw, because with that twist draw, they draw the whole of the gun out of the holster and come across their body and shoot themselves in the abdomen. So
with their finger on the trigger and the hammer cocked.
Yep. So yeah, what was it? It was in the you start seeing the 1880 soldiers. They let them in field service. They let them start carrying whatever holster they want. So you start seeing like Mexican loop style holsters or modified military holsters. But yeah, and those very early days, there were a lot of soldiers that fell victim to their own carelessness, if you will.
Well, when you're talking about cartridge firearms and stuff, there was nobody before them to teach them.
Yeah, it's true.
It was just
kind of a trial and error thing.
Just like those guys at the wagon box fight. Here's your brand new gun. 2 days later, you're going to be in the biggest fight of your life that you're going to tell your great grandkids about. It's going to take over a full day, and you're going to be doing it with a gun that you just saw for the first time, that you never even heard of. You just saw for the first time today. Not only a gun, that
the good news
in the world has ever seen a gun like this.
Good news is pretty easy to operate.
Yeah, it's easy to operate and it's familiar.
That's the other thing. It's very familiar to them because it basically is what they've been using.
Yep.
Just like, we don't pour down the muzzle no more, boys. Yeah.
Imagine how many guys accidentally, out of habit, start reaching for the clearing rod at that point. Hey, you.
I think, Duke, that's the gun we'll bring for you to film when we go up there in a couple of weeks.
We'll the 50-70?
No, the 66. I think you'd get a kick out of that one. Might even change your mind on trapdoors.
I didn't say trapdoors are completely bad. I just said that they're inferior to sharps.
I don't know. I haven't shot sharps yet, but I thought it was funny because I went into this not really being a trapdoor fan. And then by the time I actually got to shoot them all, I'm like, you know what? This is a pretty much cool gun. I kind of like this one.
You compared it to the rolling block, though.
That is true, yeah. The rolling block versus the trapdoor is no contest. Trapdoor all the way.
For military purposes.
For military and just shooter experience.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like that rolling block.
As a civilian who's not in a hurry, the rolling block's okay. But when you're in a fight, I think I honestly would take the trapdoor too, just because ejection.
Ejection, and it's just when you go to shoulder it, the trapdoor is so much more just, I don't know, you can throw it up to your shoulder and you feel like you're at home.
There's also a guy that likes the freaking Smith & Wesson too, so.
The rolling block, I threw it to my shoulder after the trapdoor and I realized,
you're looking down the barrel, not over the barrel.
It reminds me of an AK underfolder. I have to get a chin weld with this gun.
Well, honestly, it's kind of weird to think, but even like the lever actions fit you more like a trapdoor, me anyway, than the rolling block. The rolling block feels like it's a really high bore axis, even though I know it shouldn't be that way with lever actions, but it kind of feels that way.
It is a very high bore axis. You can throw it to your shoulder, close your eyes, get a good cheek weld. When you open your eyes, if you have the breech open, you can look right down the barrel. And when I mean down the barrel, I mean through the barrel, through the bore.
And that's not bad.
I shot the trapdoors out there at the fort a lot, the 73 trapdoors, and of course we're using blanks, but we look down the sights and everything. And to be honest with you, I have a heck of a time finding the sights on a trapdoor. They sit too low for me.
Oh, maybe it comes down to the user and how they like to hold the rifle, but I don't know.
Like the 66s, they're pretty low, but especially like the 84s.
The 65 is really low.
The 84s to me and the 77 style sight are way higher than the early 73 and the earlier sight, like you're saying.
Out there, I'm shooting reproduction, so.
Yeah, so and they're probably reproducing like the early 73 style sight, which is a little shorter. Do they have steps or do they have like a roller coaster roll on the sight?
It's a stepped.
Yeah, that's the earliest one. And yeah, they did. In reality, that was part of that earlier complaints we were talking about. That, I mean, they didn't actually put the trapdoor out till 74. So they flat out did a lot of changes in 74, 5, and 6. By 77, it's almost a completely, I mean, it's a lot of different stuff on it. By 77, the carbines have clearing rods in the buttstock. The sights are higher on the rifle. The breech is wider. The receiver's wider. They do a lot of change people don't. And yeah, it's because just like you were saying, there was a lot of negative feedback right early in the 73's lifetime, just like the M16.
Right.
So,
and if anybody's wondering what I'm working on here, making noises, I was given a saber. The guy that I gave it to him, he was going to sell it to me, but then he went to a artist ride camp and said saber got wet and is now a rust bucket. The blade's perfect. It had one little spot that I've already buffed out, but the scabbard is a rust bucket. And that's what I'm currently working on. And then he went and put a kink in the middle of the scabbard so that the sword would quit falling out on him. But that's what I'm working on if you hear me sanding in the background.
The saboteur said,
and I don't know if I could.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I don't know if I can show a sword on here or not with the new rules, but.
It's a deadly weapon.
Well, it ain't deadly because it ain't sharp.
So let's be honest here.
A wheel lock that ain't together ain't very deadly either, is it?
Let's be honest.
Oh, you got a hammer, pretty deadly weapon. But the saboteur said, I have a picture of who I think is a Lakota warrior. He has an Evans repeater with a cartridge belt.
Ooh. That was another one that you don't really see mentioned, but they were around, was the Evans.
I feel like it's kind of like the Frank Wesson. Texan 1836 asks, 1851 Navy or 1860? I prefer the 51. Any thoughts?
I'm a 51 fanboy.
I prefer the 60. Of course,
I like the 51, and I think Duke and I like it for the same reasons. More civilian history to the 51 Navy.
Maybe
come on.
All the 60 armies get issued basically in the Civil War, and then you really don't hear from them again for a while until they start coming up as conversions. You know it. You were talking to me, Duke. Oh yeah, you were telling me about some records of 1860s being shipped, and I know they obviously were out west. Do you remember what that was about? Because you don't see them as much as the Remingtons out west after the war.
I know they had a bunch out here because that was what was used at Sand Creek.
Yeah.
And they went to Fort Union in New Mexico.
Yeah. Another question here that I know you have a lot of info on, because I don't remember if it was on a show or on the phone we talked about the other day. Gatling guns used in the Indian Wars.
Yeah, they weren't used actually all that much.
Garrett,
the Red River War is one of the few where they actually were used in combat against natives. They had a band of Southern Cheyenne that they were fighting with, and I forget whose band it was, but they had fallen back into a cave, and that's kind of a typical thing out here is when the natives come under attack, they fall back into caves or whatever's close by for safety. And they set the Gatling gun up and started firing rounds into the cave. And then they sent in the infantry in a charge to see who was still alive, and natives opened up on them. And so they had fired again with the Gatling and sent soldiers in, and the natives opened up on them, and kept on going, and finally, after dark, they gave up. And when they went up there next morning, the natives had got away, and there wasn't any sign that they had hit anything. I think we lost Garrett.
Yeah, we did. Old Gatling gun was effective, huh? Real problem solver.
Yeah, it was really effective at using up surplus ammunition.
Surplus ammunition, peppering some rocks.
Well, we had this discussion because actually, Josh from Everything Black Powder had me on his I think it's called Into History podcast, and he asked me about that. And first of all, of course, I told him I'm not a firearms expert. I'm a firearms enthusiast, and I'm not a Gatling gun enthusiast at all. Really, don't know that much about them. But when I sat down and actually scratched my head and thought about it, outside of that one thing that you just talked about, which I didn't know about at the time, I was like, I can't even remember one time a Gatling gun was fired in anger post-Civil War outside of the Spanish-American War.
Yeah, they took them on the campaign in 1876. They had a couple of 1869 model Gatling guns, which were 1-inch bore. So they're like mini artillery shells. That's the ones that Custer turned away. They didn't use it. And those things were big. We're talking Napoleon cannon carriage size big gun. Yeah, there's a picture of two soldiers standing next to him. And the top of the wheel comes up and hits them in the armpit.
That's one of the things we were discussing was how Gatling guns always get used in movies and video games and stuff. And Josh said he likens it to car chases in action movies. There's got to be one in every show.
Yeah.
We got to talking about Josie Wales. I was like, well, first of all, I'm pretty sure that was a Colt Pup Gatling gun, like an 1874 model. And second of all, there's no way that Gatling gun during the Civil War fit inside that wagon bed. And there's no way he ran it by himself.
Yeah, I mean, Gatlings were used during the Civil War.
Yes, but like you said, it's mounted on Napoleon carriages that probably wouldn't fit in that wagon bed.
Yeah, they weren't really called Gatlings. They were called battery guns. And they were considered artillery.
Yep. It's kind of like wall guns were considered artillery in the Revolutionary War.
Yep. Oh, God, I got too much stuff out in my room.
A couple questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go for
it. Jersey Red said, "Hey y'all, hi Duke."
Hey Jersey Red.
William Schlosser said, 30 watching. Don't forget to thumbs up. I could make that 31 watching. I should probably.
Yeah. Smart Alex.
I forgot to turn it on after I. Yes, notify me. Anyway, thumbs up. All right. So. Joe Arledge asking, that's a good question, a good thought. I'm sure a lot more than a few started trying to muzzle stuff the new rifles purely out of muscle memory.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Except for I don't think they would have had anything to muzzle stuff it with.
My guess is, according to the drill of the old Springfield rifle versus the trapdoor, my guess is at least somebody put it on half cock and then went to go reach for their cartridge box, probably pulled out a cartridge and probably pulled out a cartridge and went to go put it in the end of the barrel and then realized, or went to bite it. Probably went to bite it and then found out, oh, yeah, boy, that paper sure is tough.
Well, they would have probably noticed, and I'm not going to show this here, but I'm not going to show it on, if I can get it without going on screen. Probably would have noticed because they changed. You would have felt that tulip tip changed compared to.
Well, they probably wouldn't. They probably wouldn't have gotten to the ramrod. They probably would have gotten to the biting.
Yeah, if they had a cartridge. But yeah. See, here's a 60. Here's a muzzleloader ramrod tip. Here's the converted tip for the 66. This is actually out of a 61. As you can see, it has a swell, so it's harder to get out. By the 1863, they went to this little lip here. But yeah, they cut the ends, and you can even see it on an original one because they cut the ends off of the original. This is the original one here. They cut the ends off to put that different style on there, but they still use the same rod. But yeah, they did change the end of the rod, so you might feel that.
I'm pretty excited
It's
about
funny. It's kind of a family story, and my grandfather told me that. My grandmother's going to kill him when I tell this one. But we was out squirrel hunting, and he was telling us about because he used grandma's gun, hunt squirrels with, and a little 22 single shot. And he told me that the first time he took her out shooting, she tried to push the bullet into the muzzle.
Well, it's a natural reaction, I guess.
That's going to be Jeremiah whenever he gets his first cartridge gun, because he's just so used to. He takes his Nerf gun and his wooden ramrod, dowel rod. He runs around for his toy musket, and he's sitting there. I found it today. His Nerf gun was sitting over there by the toy box, and it had his ramrod stuck into the barrel.
Yeah. And Snapper chimed in, said, I love both the 60 Army and the 51 Navy, but I think I would go with the 60 in battle. That is true. I think, yeah. I'm just more accurate with the 60, and because I shoot it more, and it is going to hit slightly harder than the 51 Navy.
Yeah, but the 51 Navy's got penetration on its side.
You think that the 60 Army with the bigger powder charge and heavier conical wouldn't penetrate a little more?
Well, not when I tested them.
Round ball versus conical, or it didn't matter?
Oh, this is just conical.
Yeah, that does remind me. I do remember hearing the test that Elmer Keith talks about, where they use, now mind you, they used boards, but they used 1/2-inch boards, and they tested. Mind you, I also think it was with the same caliber, but they tested conicals versus ball, and they found that the conical is better at piercing pine boards than the ball is, obviously.
Right.
But it's that same thing that we discussed about 45-70 versus 30-06.
It's pine boards.
There's something on paper that doesn't show up versus the conicals versus round ball, and the thing that doesn't show up on paper is the front end of that round ball is bigger and actually hits harder going in.
Right.
Which is weird. Whereas the conical punches through, the round ball actually hits like a fist, whereas a conical punches through like a finger, you know.
Well, see, the test that I did is when I was testing the bullets for that Arizgon had, Mark Hubbs, and I had the 51 Navy with the Colt Cartridge Works 36, and I was shooting a target back at our shooting range back there in Fowler, and that's big tractor tires, and then they've got this big conveyor belt, rubber belting. That, you know, it's 1/2-inch thick, and it's got several layers of cotton fiber through it. Well, anyway, at 36, it just go right through that conveyor belting like it wasn't even there. But I got up there with that Johnson & Dow 44, and I was standing 10 feet away, and I shot one round, and then I felt that thing come back and hit me in the leg, and I thought it went in my leg. And I dropped my pants right there, and there was a big old bruise. And then we went up there, and I'd fired 7-8 rounds before that, and we found all those rounds on the ground between me and that target. So they were hitting that conveyor belting and just stopping. They weren't punching through it.
More because they have more area to get through, I guess.
Yeah, so it was. Yeah, they hit that thing, and they'd flatten out, come right back.
D said, I'm surprised y'all haven't talked much about conversion revolvers.
Well, there's not a lot of them mentioned in the records.
Well, mostly because they're a civilian thing for the most part.
Yeah, no, you don't see a lot of them mentioned during the fights. They just, most of the Army still using the cap ball, even when, you know, everybody's using cartridges for the long guns because the cavalry has gone mostly to Spencers at this point. The infantry's going towards the trap doors. they're still using cap and ball guns. They only converted 1,000 1860s, and they were issued down in Texas, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's from what I understand. That's why I said not very many of them.
Yep.
You know, the funny thing is, even though we start seeing the Thur conversions in 1868 and 69, Colt themselves don't really start making from the ground up spare parts conversions until 1870. So early Indian Wars, for the most part, the Colt ones aren't even going to. Now, and this always has to come with a grain of salt because there's pictures of one in particular I'm thinking of is a Colt's Dragoon that has a Remington style cylinder made by like a gunsmith, right? And it could have been done in the mid 1860s, but Colt themselves, they won't start putting those out until 1870, and they don't stop till 1878. And from what I've read, the conversions show up in the hands of the cowboys in the 1880s. That's where I see most of them. How about you, Duke? I think we lost Duke.
Yeah. No, sorry, I was taking care of something right quick. No, yeah, you start seeing a lot of and Colt was producing some conversions pretty late, but yeah, they were a cheaper option than the 73 single action Army, so they were kind of just sold along with them because you get a 73 single action for what was it, $17?
Yeah.
And you could get a conversion for less than 10, if I remember right. About half the price.
I got the big book of everything. Let me see if I can do this without it falling apart. Old model Navy pistol conversion. $7.99.
Yep.
51 Navy conversion Type 2.
Those Type 2 Richards Masons will be around for a long time.
Yeah, they'll make them clear to 1878, but they'll still be in their inventory clear up into the mid 1880s. And what's funny is every gunfight I read about in my area where pistols are involved,
conversions,
either steel cap and ball or conversions,
right?
Because that's what everybody that was poor had.
And not very many people were very wealthy that came out here after the Civil War. A little bit of a recession going on.
I mean, they weren't making tons of money off of gypsum?
You mean they weren't making tons of money and going and all buying a brand new Schofield and a Henry rifle?
Duke was the first one that I ever heard this phrase from that I started looking up that started making me realize just how awesome the trapdoor actually is. The Great Depression of 1873. I had never heard anybody talk about that until Duke told me about it. The Great Depression of 1873. Where's that in the history books? Where the country basically went under, and even Colt and everybody, and it's like the country we're not only in debt. There's letters where they say we can't make any new guns this year because we got to put shoes on the soldiers' feet. And Ethan, you're a soldier. Would you rather have a new gun or shoes?
Probably go with shoes.
When you already have your old gun. But yeah, I did not know about that. And that is why and honestly, that's why the conversions hung around so long.
Yeah. But no, yeah, it was the Great Scare of 73. That was still a result from the Civil War because, the country was pretty much in economic turmoil from the Civil War for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the whole reason why they was after gold in the Black Hills. It was after that gold up in Montana. So that's the whole reason why these Northern Plains Indian Wars are going on, is to try to get gold for the economy.
Mm-hmm. 77 was the worst year for the Springfield Armory. They had zero finances for a year. Zilch. And that was hard for them, but they made do. They made do because they hadn't spent their complete allowance from the last year. And they honestly made do by sending out a bunch of for guys that desperately needed guns. They sent out a bunch of the old 65 rimfire trapdoors they had on hand and 10 flintlock muskets.
Yeah.
Probably.
But yeah, the way Remington survived that is Remington made rolling blocks and sold that to foreign militaries.
Yep.
Colt was filling out orders from foreign militaries. Winchester was filling out orders for foreign militaries.
And Weston was filling out
Turkey. I think it was Turkey wound up adopting the 66 Winchester as their main arm.
That's the reason why they wanted that number 3 Russian in 44 or not 44 Russian, 44 Henry, so they had interchangeable rounds between their Winchester rifles and their pistols. But
actually, go ahead. Sorry.
I find it funny that Colt and Smith & Wesson were both supplying the Russian military at the same time. Smith & Wesson was supplying the number 3 revolvers and for the Russians, and Colt was supplying the Berdan 1s rifles for the Russians at the same time.
Yep. I can show you just on the Colt deal because I actually have it right here. This is the Colt firearm finances. Profit, loss, and dividend. Take a look at 1872. And that was not good. They did not have a good time. But the title of this book sums it up in 1873. Colt's firearms at the brink. Richard Jarvis and the open top 22 hold the line.
Yep.
I just the back of it says the open top 22 is Colt's first metallic cartridge revolver. 6,000 were made from 1871 to 1872, and that was supposed to be it. But the panic of 1873 and patent threats threw everything into a turmoil. With the company's existence hanging in the balance, President Richard W.H. Jarvis resurrected the open top 22, rolled the dice, and won. So that's how they hung on. The cheapest little gun they could possibly make. They said, hey, Smith & Wesson doesn't have the patent on that little 22. They made it, or do they? Let's make one now. 10 years later.
Smith & Wesson said, hold on. Wait a minute. Smith & Wesson said, it took us 7 years for our pistol to take off.
Because of a patent infringement.
Our patent should be extended for 7 years.
Okay, I'm looking through here for questions. Let's see. Saboteur said, a question for Ethan. Do you think you and a squad of soldiers could use a Spencer effectively with modern training? There's one hanging on the wall behind me.
I mean, if you're using...
You were just playing with an original a couple of hours ago, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Not really. No. Because it all boils down to tactics. And even back then and even nowadays, you have to have different weapons and different squads for different jobs. For instance, people like to think that linear warfare, all fighting online, died off in the Civil War, and it definitely did not. People don't realize that our main battle drills for the infantry nowadays are still line warfare and trying to get a flank on somebody. That's why you get your big, heavy-set guys they can lift a lot and they can carry a lot, and you give them something like a 240 machine gun or a saw or something, and have them, whenever you come under fire, get to cover and hold down the enemy line while your fast PT studs, as it were, is what they call them. You get them with M4s, and they're going to book it, try to find some cover and book it, and basically work like a modern-day version of the old cavalry and try to come in from the flank and push through. So we really do still use a lot of the old tactics, and if you're just using a squad of guys with Spencers, I guess you're going to make them the assaulting element or the support by fire. Yeah, it really wouldn't work very well. Maybe you can hand them to the assaulting elements, but even then it's going to slow down the rate of fire for what they need. There's my take on that.
Now, what about the same question with Henry repeaters?
I was about to say, because you got to remember, the Spencer has some ejection issues where it's up and down.
That's what I was going to say. It's got ejection issues. Its loading's a little slow now. Henry's, I mean, it wouldn't be ideal, but you could almost kind of do it for an assaulting element. You wouldn't want it for your support by fire, but yeah, if you're going to send guys into assault position, kind of could work a little better.
Now, but the Spencer does have the Blakesley box going for it.
Yeah,
So
it does have that, but
basically
the main
preloaded
thing,
magazines.
yeah. But the thing is, though, if we're talking about modern combat, you're going up against AKs at 30 feet, sometimes 5 feet.
And you also have to remember we're still dealing with Spencers with a rimfire because officially it's never been changed unless you're talking about centerfire modern Spencers.
Yeah. Now, a defensive position, holding a defensive position, that would be your best bet, honestly. If you're trying to hold a building or a trench line, you got more time to sit there and take a well-aimed shot. But yeah, as far as like going on modern patrols, infantry patrols, yeah, it would not be ideal at all. Speaking of old weapons in modern warfare, me and Caleb were watching some footage from that from the Russo-Ukrainian war, and we were watching it, and we noticed one of those Ukrainian guys, militia guys, was carrying a number 3 Russian revolver. Like, so we can say that technically the number 3 Russian is still being in use in service today.
I bet if you looked around, there's a 73 single action out there somewhere too.
Not really, because the Russians never, I don't think they bought 73s. Say that and somebody be like, actually, they bought 4 of them.
The book with the 799. I've only had 2 books out tonight, Doug Dukes. The one was, I've had 3 now. With the
you had Belden, right?
I had Haven and Belden out earlier when I was reading the surplus reports. That was out of Al Fresca's book number 2 on the Springfield rifle. The other one was Colt Firearms at the Brink. Richard Jarvis, I showed you that.
So you're talking about the price on the conversions.
Oh, that was Haven and Belden. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was the price of the conversions was $7.99.
And take that kind of with a grain of salt because some things change in Haven and over the years from Haven and Belden. But that was an actual picture of an advertisement, so that's what that was. And the other one was this one. So, but you weren't asking about that. Let's see. He wishes they were still $7. Yeah. Basically, just a little under half of what a single action army would have cost you. Okay, I don't know anything about this, Duke. Black Hand Gang actually in the Old West in the 1870s. Is this real?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
If you mean, was there organized crime out here? Yeah, there was. Was it mafia level? No.
You think of the Black Hand? I think what was that in World War One? That was the group that kind of started that whole thing, if I remember right. That was in Serbia.
Yeah, Peaky Blinders. That's a good indicator when all that stuff kind of really gets started going.
Those guys get a lot more brazen after a couple of world wars.
Yeah. I order the Peaky Blinders.
Oregon Outback says, in my 70s, still have a BB lodged in my lower back. Okay. D said, in the Battle of Pulvana, Ethan can probably address this. I've heard a lot of different things. The Turks used Winchesters against the Russians, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
They did.
Because they had the 1866 musket.
Yeah, and it was the Battle of, what was that? Me and you talked about this quite a bit because we had some discussions about it later.
Because Othias came up with some information nobody had seen before, and I can't remember what it was, but it turned out that the 44 rimfire cartridge did not, or whatever it was they were using, did not perform as well as some people had always said it did. Yeah. That maybe it was more of a secondary thing. Hey, Jeffrey Davis is in. We're scrolling down here. Snapper said, if I saw a 73 single action army in Ukraine for the war, I promise you, you guys will see Snapper on TV in Ukraine trying to track those bad boys down.
You come watch the Cal. Hey! Pause that.
Okay, question. What if Custer had a 240 Bravo?
Oh, we talked about this earlier. Last, how far away were the natives, Duke, behind Custer's boys?
Not very dead gum far.
How many of them were there?
A heck of a lot more of them than there was Custer had. He's probably outnumbered 3-1, 4-1.
Okay, so what is it? Is the number? You see, it's funny because in they talk about the two different numbers in Son of the Morning Star, where they record 2,000, but she says 10,000, and that's of course just a TV series, so I don't know the difference. But
yeah, no, he was probably up against 12 to 1,500.
Okay, so against 200 guys, that's what, 6 to each?
250. So yeah, 6-1.
6-1.
6-1, half a dozen of the other.
And you got to get dismounted. You got to deploy the bipod. Get it. Well, I mean, I guess you could ride with it loaded, but so say it's already loaded. You probably got a 100-round belt on it. It takes you about 20 to 30 seconds to dump a 100-round belt. You know, and then you got
the fight lasts as long as it takes a hungry man to eat a meal.
No, what I was getting at is why it might have saved him is because the natives would have never seen that gun before and probably would have scared the living hell out of them.
That would have been the only thing I could think of. And those things, when they go off, like the 240, the PKM, you got a PKM shooting your direction. There is something about that thing. It makes a booming sound off in the distance. So yeah, there is that very loud roaring sound would probably be a little bit of a factor. So maybe.
But
it's like Clint Eastwood said, this is AK-47, the preferred weapon of your enemy, and it makes a very distinctive sound when it's fired at you.
That 240 makes a very distinctive sound too. It is a very
he cheated. I say he adapted
loud, barking sound.
He cheated. I say he adapted Novocaine. One thing, though, in this discussion that we don't talk enough about is the determination of the natives.
Yeah.
Ethan, you're a father of 3. A standing army that you outnumber shows up in your front yard to take your family away, and you hear a sound like you have never heard before and a weapon you have never seen, but you have no chance to get your family away, more than likely because this army tends to kill.
And I'm on horseback going up.
Children.
And
are
I'm
you
on
going to run from that sound, or are you going to find a way to get around it and win this fight no matter what it takes?
Honestly, no, I don't think I would. Like, I know it's just saying it here now sitting in my basement, but if it did come down to my kids and I'm on a horse and I hear this weird sound and everybody dropping around me.
You hear that burp in the sky.
Honestly, at that point, you're going to be sitting there thinking you're charging full speed at a gallop on your horse. You're thinking, I'm either going to get hit or I'm not. If I run, I'm going to run just as high of a chance of getting hit as if I'm charging forward, and I'm going to put it down and go. Just like the guys at and it's different because it's not family for Beersheba, but them guys at Beersheba did that against machine guns. And and that's the thought that's going through their head. I guarantee it is, I'm here. I'm already in this. It's go. There's no stopping. There's no turning around. You got to make it.
And wouldn't you say, though, that when your kid's life's on the line, that gives you a whole different and we don't talk. I think Duke's the one who's brought this up. We don't talk about that aspect enough. As far as like the natives, they're like, this is it. It's all or nothing. Wouldn't you say, Duke?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's our last stand.
If it's my kids, we're going.
We're not having another Washita here.
Right.
And we don't talk about that enough, I don't feel like.
Yep. Yeah, that's how that would go. And that's why I think that if they had a 240, I think they probably still would have been overran.
Yeah, they might have. The only thing I could say is, yeah, with something like that, would have scared the natives, where the natives might have backed off and then just kind of did more of a defensive thing and waited for the village to get clear and not really attacked, but just kept them there.
Yeah.
You think that would have been an option? Let's just, I mean, honestly, you know way more about the fight than me. Well, if that scenario took place, they back off, they make a defensive position. What would happen next, you think?
Oh, then if they had a 240, that definitely have it.
No, I don't mean that. But let's just say that let's just say that Crazy Horse is being real conservative that day. He sees they're not coming down the hill anymore. He tells his guys, hold up here and just keep them back. Then what happens?
It would have been bad for the natives, because then Custer would have had a good chunk of his force, and he would have got word out to Terry and Gibbon, and then Terry and Gibbon would have come in, and natives would have been done at that point.
So, in reality, escape would have never really been a choice.
No.
I was just wondering.
That's why, going back to what I was saying, it's all or nothing.
What happens if Custer misses that whole valley and doesn't show up for another 7 daes? Do they stay there, or do they get to Canada?
No, they weren't. I don't think at that point they were really wanting to go to Canada. But if Custer would have been a week behind, they wouldn't have been at the Little Bighorn. They'd have been somewhere else further up the Little Bighorn, because they were getting ready to move that day. They had used up the resources. They're only camping about a week at a time, because they had been at Rosebud the day before Crook showed up. They had just moved the village. They just set the village up at Greasy Grass, and found out that Crook was right there where the village had been. And so they go back and they hit Crook there. And then, it's 8 days later, and they're getting ready to take down the village and move again when Custer shows up. So if Custer would have been a week later, they probably would have run right smack dab into Gibbon and Terry work, because they were further up the Little Bighorn.
What was their goal? They left the reservations, right? Most of them did, right?
Yeah.
And their goal was just to hang out in the...
Just try to survive up there in that part of the country.
Well, you'd have to think that a village that size would be so difficult to maintain for more than a day or two.
Yeah,
and everything else.
Yeah, they was doing a lot of it, just food for the people. If I remember right, Sitting Bull had put a ban on hunting. They were realizing that a big village couldn't sustain itself up there that long.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, the village disperses, and that's why it gets easier and easier for them to be basically picked off, and they start giving up, is because once they get into smaller bands, then they don't survive as well as smaller bands. So American Horse's village is going to get hit at Slim Buttes. Dull Knife's village gets hit in the early spring of 77, and then Crazy Horse decides to give it up after that. Sitting Bull's going to make it to Canada. But, out of the, I'll say there's 1,200 to 1,500 warriors at Little Bighorn. Means there's probably 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 people total, women and kids and elderly.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot really going up against. And it's not all one tribe either. It's all different tribes that are mixed in together. But they're not going to be able to survive very much long term. Not when you got the whole U.S. Army out after you.
Yeah. Uncle Chaw said, I heard Custer shot himself.
Let's not have that discussion again tonight.
We're about to wrap her down, aren't we?
Yeah. That's kind of like beating a dead horse.
But maybe if he hasn't heard your point of view on it.
No, he didn't shoot himself. He's too arrogant for that.
One more here. We got a comment here from D, and this has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. He said, Okay, I know this isn't on topic, but how prevalent was cast iron cookware in the Old West? I've heard that Lewis and Clark's Dutch oven was the only piece of equipment that survived their trip.
Yeah, there's cast iron around. There was a lot of sheet iron because sheet iron was cheaper to make and it was lighter. But yeah, there was cast iron. Dutch ovens are noted. They're on trade ledgers. Most of the skillets you see are sheet iron skillets.
Yep. Hey, Guns of the West is in.
Hey,
I just waved like my 3-year-old. Not even thinking about it.
See you, bye.
See you, bye.
So Dustin, how you liking that new holster?
William Schlosser said cast iron, the original no stick coolware.
Yeah.
Wait, we've been running for an hour 51. You want to go to 2 hours? Ethan and I.
Yeah, we'll run it till 2, and then we'll cut it there.
Okay. Still have 26 people in here.
Actually, I want to shut my camera off here for a second.
All right. So, Ethan, what's your favorite weapon of the Indian Wars?
Long arm or sidearm?
Long arm.
I have grown. There was a time when I would have said the 1860 Henry, but I have really gotten fond of that 1866 trapdoor.
Yeah.
I just like the way it feels. So, long arm, 1866 trapdoor. Sidearm. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have been used very much in the Indian War, but there were a few people who had them. We know at least one of them was at Little Bighorn. Would have been the good old number 3 Russian.
Yeah.
Dustin said, "Oh man, love the holster."
That's good.
Louisiana Gray said, we know Mosby used pockets and 62 pocket police. I thought he used 51 Navies more. But you reckon the 61 Navy was the prevalent?
There weren't a lot of 61 Navies made compared to everything else.
No, I want to say,
what was it, 30, 40,000, 50,000?
Not even that much.
Not even that much, yeah.
And they were bought up. But I do have to say that one of the handguns that made it from the Civil War out to our ranch was the 61 Navy.
Yep.
So, imagine that.
Let me look, but I think 10,000 to 11,000 is seems like the more accurate number.
Put it this way, there was 3, or no, there wasn't 3. There was 200,000 units of the 51 Navy put out. No, 300,000.
Yeah, it was way more because there was 221 some thousand of the.
Because the 51 Navy was second to the 49 pocket.
Model Army.
And they were producing 51 Navies right up until the day they quit making Captain Bull revolvers.
Yep. And the 61 Navy kind of went up to the fire and then never regained the prominence after the fire. They didn't reset a lot of that machinery for several of those guns. A couple of them being the Dragoons. They obviously weren't making them much anyway, but Colt Brevet, Confederate Navy. Give me just a second here, because I know it's in here. Just gotta find it. Long arms. New model holster pistol. New model Army. New model Army. New model Army. New model belt Navy. Made from 61 to 72. New model Navy. Okay, go back here. New police, new model. Rifle, new model police. New pocket, new model Navy. See, Navy pistol, new model. That's what I hate about Haven and Bell.
Hey, Sabter, if you're still there, I just got the book you just sent me, the electronic book.
The electronic book?
Yeah, he just sent me one, so.
But yeah, they're not going to be very prominent. I'm going to just look it up here on my phone in my notes, maybe. If I still have them. I'll try Wikipedia, maybe. Not that you should ever trust that.
But, yeah, we discovered.
Yeah, Wikipedia is a great place to find sources, but it's not a good place to quote from.
The numbers are in that book, but there's a lot of pages in that book. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, number built 38,000. I don't really buy that one, but maybe it was. I have to go look at maybe it was something like that. But that's still not very many, considering how many of those wound up in Japan, which was a lot.
What was the 61 Navy?
Yeah. A lot of them wound up in Japan in the Boshin Wars.
Kind of like the number 2?
Probably. Any advice on replacing the hand spring on a third model Dragoon, Duke?
Yeah, you have to buy a whole new hand and fit it. Or you can go with a plunger system, but I don't know how well that would work on a Dragoon frame. But, yeah, you have to wind up replacing the hand and doing a little bit of filing. Just remember, always take 1 or 2 swipes, test the fit. Don't take a bunch of swipes and test the fit, because if you take a bunch of swipes, you might swipe too much.
Yeah.
Overtime is fixable. Under timing requires a new hand.
Dustin wants to know Japan, where all the percussion caps have gone to, asking for a friend.
Jeez.
I know Dustin's going to Japan.
Yeah.
You can go on a mission trip, Dustin.
Go down there, go get us some caps.
What were you going to have Saboteur saying, Cher? I was reading.
Oh, he sent me a thing on Colt conversions.
What was it?
It's some sort of electronic book, so I got to look at it yet.
It's not the Colt 1851 and 61 Navies and their conversions, is it?
No.
Okay. I got a couple conversion books over there, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
You can share it with Garrett if it had his info. Yes, Duke, you can send him my info later on.
Yeah, I'll try to remember to do that here.
I could use it. I can always use anything on conversions. They're kind of in my wheelhouse at the moment. Lone Dragoon said, "Thanks, Duke. I was hoping it'd be simpler." Oh, the McDowell book. I don't think I have a McDowell book on conversions.
Yeah, it's R. McDowell.
Yeah, I don't think I have that one. Okay, that'd be nice. So that's about what we got. It's 1:50. We got a minute to go.
Yeah, if we go over a little bit,
yeah,
there's good questions still coming in.
Yeah, throw them out there, guys, if you got them.
Talk about Brunswick.
Right now, I'm sitting here with a bag of Brussels sprouts frozen on top of my head on my chest with my phone on it, trying to keep it from overheating.
That's one way.
It does not like these. Here lately, it has not been liking doing live chats. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It mentions an Army field testing conversions out west. Yeah, that's probably the 1,000 that we were just talking about in Texas. And there's actually a couple, because there is, and I don't know if it's authentic or not, but there is a box of 44 Colt at Fort Larned, and it's 44 Colt cartridges.
Right.
But we were having trouble determining whether or not this was supposed to be for paper cartridges or 44 Colt conversion cartridges. Caleb says 38,661 navies were made. Interesting. Wonder where he got that from. Probably from my video.
Only call them 3561 navies. I don't know what a 3561 navy is.
I think he probably meant to go 1861 Navy.
Well, he sure messed that one up.
Yeah, that's what I had some people ask me.
Oh, 38,635.
Okay.
That's what it was. Okay.
He probably got that from a video. I have people ask me that all the time. Go back and they'll comment and say, "What was it that you said?" And I'm like, I don't remember. That was a long time ago. I don't remember anything from my last video.
There's very little that I remember.
I mean, I remember the general information, but when I sit down to make one of those long videos, I have a script, and I don't remember what's on that script.
Hell, I was watching one of my old videos the other day, and I was sitting there and I was watching that. And I was like, "Oh hell, I got that wrong. I got that wrong bad."
Well, it's not always your fault either because the information changes.
Yeah, it's like, holy Moses.
Did you take
it's like the videos I was doing when I was doing videos real strong, I wasn't really prepared for them. And it's like right now where I'm at, I'm more prepared to do them now than I was then.
Well, that's good. I think next time we go up there and film, we ought to do one like you would have done your old ones. An inside talking and an outside shooting.
Well, I don't really have a good place to film for the inside part.
All you need is a green sheet.
I ain't got room for that.
What was the plan with the green sheet? That was going to be you did green screen a couple times.
Did green screen.
Yeah, I did, and then I got tired of messing with it, so it was getting to be a pain in the butt for no more views and subscribers I was getting. So that was kind of one of those things. Is like, that's funny because Santee, me, and Dustin, all had about the same viewership. When it was getting going early on, and I bought the fancy camera and did all that stuff, and they were using their phones. It's like my fancy camera didn't do me a bit of good.
Yep. Saboteur 45 says, Gun Samurai has a video where the reenactors are cleaning matchlock, and it shows a 51 Navy with Japanese stampings on it. That is something I'd talk about.
I found that guy's channel the other day. And because I was looking up wheel lock and matchlock stuff, and I found that, and I was like, Next video down was talking about or it wasn't even a video down. Somebody in the comment section was talking about Japanese guns, and they mentioned that Smith & Wesson #2 incident.
Yeah. No, but there's a lot of Japanese Mark 51 and 61.
Hey, there's something I remembered. His last name, at least, Samurai Noma.
Yeah, you did a short video on him once.
He did.
You did.
He fought off five or six spearmen with a #2 revolver.
Well, they brought a knife to a gunfight. It
wasn't a very big gun, but it did the trick. That time.
Damn, I would have thought the spear would have had more range.
No, evidently.
It wasn't #1. It was the 32, not the 22.
It was the 32 Army.
Even then, I still would have figured the spear would have had more range.
I did some testing with that. That 32
like that gun.
Yeah. That 32 rimfire, when it's loaded correctly, like all the loads that people do nowadays are these watered down sissy loads. But if you do the actual original loading that Elmer Keith talks about in his book with a 13 grains, it's basically a 49 pocket model, which, I mean, that's done quite a bit.
Yeah.
A little heavier bullet.
I figured their Japanese armor would have deflected the bullet too.
No, definitely not. Because he survived that one, but the one he didn't survive was the one when they snuck up on him and he did not have his sidearm with him. They made sure he didn't have his sidearm with him the second time.
Yeah.
Okay, Duke, do you know how the cavalry was equipped in the Powder River Campaign of 1865?
So they would have had units of the 11th Ohio. So it was probably going to be a mixture of Spencers, Sharps, and Spencer rifles actually were more common with the Cav out here in the West for whatever reason. But Spencers, Sharps, I know there were some Maynadiers, there was a Gallagher's, one or two Jocelyn's actually, if I remember right. So there was, it was a mix. But I do remember reading that they had sabers because at one little skirmish, the soldiers drew their sabers and the natives left the battle because what was that story? I was just discussing that. Was we discussing that? Or, no, we wasn't discussing that on here earlier.
Talking about that.
Yeah. The natives had prepared for a battle that they said the bullets would be deflected. And they drew their sabers, and the natives left the field because they hadn't prepared their medicine for that. Yeah, because the medicine man was, the medicine man said, if you drink out of this water or something, the bullets won't hurt you. And then the cavalry drew their sabers, and the
cavalry found a loophole.
But there was that account, and the other thing they said was that when they drew the sabers, the natives saw the glint and were scared to death of the sabers and took off. But yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure that was during the Powder River campaign.
That's a good one.
Oh, guys, we didn't prepare for that. There's a loophole.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of stories about that. Was it even Setting Bull? Ate from the wrong spoon. Or who was it ate off of the?
That was Roman Nose.
Roman Nose, yeah, ate from
the metallic spoon, and so the bullets. His medicine was broken.
And he died though too, right? That was it.
Yeah, he was killed at Beecher Island. Yep. Because when he was killed, that the attack kind of fell apart. Because he was saying, he kind of started it up and was saying, if you do this and that, the bullets won't hurt you. And the natives kind of said, well, if you're leading us, why aren't you leading from the front? Why aren't you out in the front in the battle? And he went up the front, and on the first charge he went on, he got killed.
Huh.
Now, what's funny is I've heard that, but then I've also heard that he didn't get killed until like day 4. Like the Americans say they killed him, and then the Indians were like, no, that was somebody else. It was like day 4. Have you heard that?
Yeah, and I don't have my books here because I got them all out at the fort because I was reading up on Beecher Island. But, there was, there's several different accounts of how it all happened.
Mm-hmm.
There always is.
The Lone Dragoon said, I wrote a good bit about the 44th Ohio Cavalry. And Oregon Outback said, my life was full of events that I didn't prepare my medicine for.
Yeah. I'm going to use that. When we go to work tomorrow, or actually tonight.
My medicine's not ready.
I'm going to go out there and I'm like, hold up. I didn't do the right medicine for this situation.
Well, you guys about ready to shut her down?
Yeah, I think that's pretty. Yeah, let's see. What are we at? 2:09. Let's go just another couple minutes here. And if anybody's got any last minute questions, comments, concerns, what do you guys got going on?
I'll let Ethan answer that.
I don't know what we got going on.
Oh. Sunday morning at 7:30, we have a review of the 1872 open top from you, Birdie.
And Garrett's okay. There may or may not be a 350-yard shot in that video.
There will be.
Yeah, you whacked. Ethan, you did a good job of whacking the steel behind the camera. It almost sounded like it went all the way out there.
Yeah. I had that comment already. I wasn't there to witness it. For all we know, you could have added that sound in there. Yes, we definitely did that.
All I can say is that bullet got there faster at 350 yards than I figured it would.
Yeah.
You got to figure it's going to get there pretty fast at 11 to 1,200 feet per second with that plowboy load out of a 7.5-inch barrel.
Yeah.
Well, if you look close to that video, you can actually see it hitting the target. And then it takes a long time for the bullet to get there, and then the sound comes back quite a bit quicker.
Yeah, because my Henry was, I guess it was about the same amount of time.
Yeah. Your Henry was also loaded a lot lighter.
Yeah, because those cowboy loads that I was hitting with were doing 800 feet per second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it is officially 350 yards from the table to that tripod, and I was about 4 feet from the table to that target. I was about 4 foot from the table. Caleb was right there at the table with the camera. So that's how far it is. Let's see a couple comments here. Mill Creek Range said, "Good night, everyone. Got lots of work to do tomorrow and then fly back home Friday morning." Oregon Outback said, "I love my 72 open top." The Lone Dragoon said, "The 72 is my favorite." Mine too. Louisiana Gray said, "Enjoyed the history and knowledge tonight, fellows, and also the views." Snapper's Antique Firearms Unlimited said, "Fun. 72 is always a good video." And D said, "IMA has an original 1863 Sharps converter to 5070 and an original Japanese matchlock." And that's all the comments we have.
Original. I've actually thought about getting one of those on Gunbroker because you see them come up every now and then. They're not that expensive. The Japanese matchlocks, that is.
Oh. I'm going to say, Caleb should buy a Sharps conversion here.
Yeah. We had a time where we almost bought a bore Sharps once.
Almost don't count, so go back and try it again.
Yeah, well, it's a little late for that because we'll never be able to afford it for the price he was asking. Again. I mean, if it was offered at that price, yeah, we'd be able to afford it, but we'll never see that price again. What they want, $500 for that, Garrett?
Yep, 500.
Yeah, you didn't take it?
Well,
I bought a trapdoor and a Winchester 73.
We knew what a trapdoor was, and we knew what a 73 Winchester was at that time. We didn't exactly know what a bore shark was at that time.
I was like, it doesn't have a hammer.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a hammer. Why would I want this thing? It doesn't have a hammer.
Oh, boy. So what's Caleb got coming in for the next one?
The 1881 Forager is coming in pretty soon, and after that is the 61 the 61. I believe it was the 61 or 63. I can't remember now. Muzzle loading Springfield, and Ethan just got the Brunswick in. So
yes, and I'm working on it. It's another one of my mini projects that I'm going to finish one of these days.
So then the last question, then we'll shut her down here, is how soon until we get the first episode of the history of the trapdoor?
Soon as we get the muzzle loading Springfield in. Ethan did get the uniform, so obviously we're there.
Definitely.
To finish painting the new set and get that muzzleloader in, I would say next month would be sometime in September would be my guess.
Oh, new set, huh?
Yeah. You know where Caleb's freezer is, the big freezer?
Yeah.
That's all cleaned out. That we're going to build a set. We've got everything. I just got to paint it and put the stuff up to make it look basically just like a miniature version of the Sutler store there at Laramie.
Oh, okay.
Because I figured that's where I'd talk. I kind of wanted to be the post Sutler for the talk, and I don't know why, but I felt like I wanted to try that. And I have pictures of you there, so it's like I have a pretty good reference. But I got to paint it white so the lighting is right.
There you go. Yep. So, all right. Well, we made it for 2 hours and 15 minutes here.
I got more down
well,
the hill.
We're all caught up on the chat there. So, yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. What did we wind up with the count?
Oh, we maxed out at 35, I think.
Okay, yeah, so not terrible. But anyway, yeah, thanks for all coming on. 2 weeks, we'll do this again. Like I said, right now we don't have a set schedule. Eventually, we'll get to Tom Tobin and all that I promised beforehand. I just don't know when. But yeah, we'll kind of keep going along best we can, and maybe this winter time I can kind of start focusing on more specific topics. But next week, see, you're having a chat next week, right, Garrett?
Yes, it will be all of us. I assume you're going to be there.
Yeah, I should be around.
The 11 Bang Bang Show with special guest Plowboy's Ghost.
Oh yeah, I haven't been on one with Plowboy for a while, so that'd be a good show.
I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about 4570s in there at some point.
Yeah. Well, Ethan better wear the blue Yankee uniform so Plowboy has something to gripe about.
Nope. I won't wear it more than I have to.
I was hoping you'd come on here tonight so we could get it all squared away so you look right.
Oh hell. No. I will say I've gotten more work on this project this display piece tonight than I have in a long time. It's almost done.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I forgot to ask you. You got the 1-inch stripe down the trouser seam, right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
yeah.
All righty.
We
well,
got everything you told us to get, Duke.
Yeah, it just doesn't mean it's wearing it right. Yeah. He texted me and he's worried about the hat and how he's wearing the hat, and it's like you got the cap box and the sash on wrong.
Well, in my defense, I was doing what the instructions said that were sent with it. So
yeah, but did you get the NCO sword and baldric?
No, we never did the sword.
Okay.
We figured it might not be important for a training session, but we probably will eventually.
Yeah.
We dropped almost $800 on everything in that uniform right there.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
say
500 for the cloth and hat, and 300 in leather.
I started getting the stuff together for the Confederate uniform, and it's only like $250.
Take good care of it because Quartermaster Shop went out of business.
Yep. Will do.
So, but anyway, yeah, we're going to sign off here for tonight. So thank you all for coming on. We'll do this again in 2 weeks. So until then, y'all stay tuned. Keep your powder dry. Take it easy. Catch you on the next one.
See you. Bye.